Hello, welcome to the channel. My name's CavemanAston, and today we're going to be taking a look at my version of the TSPROF knife sharpener. Very much DIY, and it's got a lot left to go. But the idea was that this is a bit of a prototype, and at some point I'm going to be remaking all of the various bits on the lathe and the milling machine. But I've done this with only a pillar drill and a couple of hand tools. So as long as you've got a drill that can drill straight, there's no reason you can't copy this. Let's have a look at it. Okay guys, so we're going to start with the bit that I'm the least proud of, which is the bit that actually does the sharpening. There's good reason. I wanted to make it as universal as possible, so I wanted to be able to take knives that I've sort of just taken from a lump of metal and really grind them down. So I've got a bit for a file here, and then on the other side I've got a little space for stones to go in. So it's really crude. So the whole bit, I've got a long bit of brass that sits here, and it goes into like a ball joint for RC cars, which is quite handy, but it allows it to move up and down, left and right, so I can get the full motion across the knife without it moving up the end. So that slides back and forth on the brass. I've then threaded the end and put it into an M8 standoff bar here, and I've just got a bit of M8 threaded rod that runs all the way through. Here I've just got a chock of wood, and then onto the chock of wood, same here, all I've got is some little right angle brackets. They hook over and they've got a slot, so once you've put in, say, the file, which slides out because it's a really bad design, all you need to do, you've got a thread that goes across. I'll show this up close in a minute. So you've got the right angle bracket, sits like this, slides back and forth, so you grab the file and you just slide it up, he says. Just slide it up into the slot and into the slot. This is looking really bad. So slide it up into the two slots, and all you need to do is squeeze the bracket and tighten down the clamp on the side, and with any luck that will hold it in. And because all of the forces are are going front to back, like so, when you're sharpening a knife, it doesn't really matter that it could fall out sideways, because there shouldn't be any of that sideways pressure on it. Then up here I've done the same thing, but instead I've got a bit of wood that sits in those clamps, and on those clamps I've just put like a 45-degree cut in, so these sharpening stones that I've got from eBay, so there's a little angle on the top that should, or does, just slot into, get rid of that, just slides in here. So you grab the stone and just slide it in, sits nice and tight, back and forth. That's all set at the same height difference on either side, so that even if you flip it over, you've still got the same level of accuracy going back and forth, so you're not regrinding a new angle on it. Okay guys, so obviously a knife sharpener that can't hold a knife is of absolutely no use to man nor beast. So we'll go over this bit here. So at the back we've got some M8 bolts, M8 nuts. Through those I've drilled some holes just here and here, and then all the way through I've put some quite thin, think about 1mm metal plates or strips on both sides. So that then comes all the way out, and then I don't know if you can quite see, but you've got a top plate and a bottom plate. So naturally they'll want to stay spaced apart. And then here I've got some bolts with some wing nuts on, so as you squeeze those, screw those down, that clamps around the knife and holds it tight here. You can see I can move the whole rig. I mean, it's not a particularly heavy rig, but it clamps it down pretty tight. I have got some thicker metal plates in here just to space it out a little bit, and if you're doing it yourself I'd recommend putting just a bit of rubber or neoprene, something soft on there, just to stop it scoring the knife. So then that is the actual holder itself. These arms here are bolted into this big plate here. So this is the big plate. It's 5mm by probably about 30mm long, and all I've done is I've marked it down the centre line and I've chain drilled through. Once I've finished chain drilling, so for those of you that don't know, chain drilling is just a series of holes next to each other. Taken a file, filed it out, so I've now got pretty close to just a slot running through the middle of the material. As you might be able to see, you've got quite a big M8 bolt in here, and through that I've got an M8 nut, or vice versa. Got an M8 standoff, I suppose, with an M8 bolt. That goes all the way through. On the back there is yet another wing nut. So what that allows me to do is, if I undo the clamps here that hold the knife, so they just spin off like that, the plates open up and the knife slides out. So you can see there, they just squeeze up and down on the clamp on the knife. And on the back of this I can undo the wing nut, and this just slides up and down. So same thing on both sides. That means I can fit in big knives, small knives. Potentially, if I was to make these open ridiculously wide, I could fit something like an axe in, anything I fancy really. So that, they can spin all the way out to the edges. And as you might notice, at the moment they twist. Now, preferably I'd like them to be locked so they're always at 90 degrees and they run straight like that. So what I try and do is I'll make sure the knife is clamped in both of them. That means that the line or path between here and here has to be dead straight, and then you can tighten these up on the back. So what I then decided is, part of knife sharpening you have to do both sides of the knife and you have to swap it over quite regularly. So I thought, what if I could take it out and spin it? It's on the table, so I'll move the camera and hopefully without it going too much out of focus. Bring it forwards, and you can just pull forwards and spin this round. So obviously if the knife sat in the clamps, the whole knife flips over. So then you can just keep on spinning, and as you can probably hear or see, it just clamps into place. So 180 degrees round, and it just locks back into place. That was pretty much the entire reason I've made this whole jig. I was too lazy to keep on flipping it over and reclamping the knife. And the key, you ask, to this little bit of magic? I've got a bit of round stock that's 40mm diameter. I have drilled a hole straight through the centre of it, which is where this 12mm rod runs all the way through. I've then cross-drilled it here, which is what you need the pillar drill for, to make sure it's very accurate, with an 8mm hole. I've then cut this in half through the middle of that, so that allows the whole thing to separate like this. So what I've then done, in one half of the 8mm hole, I have put some brass rod. I've drilled through the brass rod, or just cut it, so there's a sort of little piece of brass on the two halves. So I lift it up, spin it. You've also got the bit of brass that side as well, so they sit in there. I then drilled through and secured them in so they won't ever fall out. You could epoxy it in, weld it if you were that way inclined, but basically they just sit in there so that when you spin it round it will slot into the remaining half on the other half of this. Then this bit is then locked into this whole block of wood here. Got the nuts on top, and they just clamp down. So I drilled a 40mm or maybe a slightly undersized 39mm hole through the block of wood, cut it in half, drilled these holes through, and then they just clamp it down nice and tight. So this bit's locked in place, this bit's free to move. This plate on the front, I've got two holes here and here. They were underneath the washer that you would have seen. So see there. So underneath the washer there is a M5 bolt there and there, countersunk in. You might just be able to see the ridge of it under the washer there. So they go through and they lock into this, and this nut locks everything onto the rod that runs down the back. And to make sure it springs back into place as it runs round, I've just got a series of springs here. Unfortunately I couldn't find a spring that was the right size, so I've just put several of them together. These are just M12, I'm not sure what they're called, but the bits that you hammer into the bottom of wooden furniture or bits of wood, and then they've got a threaded insert. I've drilled the threaded insert out, but there was just the right size for the spring to slide over the top. The reason being is that the spring coils were getting stuck on the threads of the rod. So if I were to invest a bit more money next time, I'll probably have this as a solid bar, and I'll just thread the end to put the nut on. So that way this is nice and smooth and it goes in and out quite easily. To keep the tension, I've just got this big old wing nut, so obviously if you tighten that up, there's more pressure pushing this way, or vice versa, more pressure pushing this way, because this block of wood is locked in place. More pressure this way, and that's what pulls the plate forward. So when you take it off and spin it around, that's what the pressure this way tries and pushes it back. And the last bit, just to kind of hold it all square, I've just got a bearing that sits in a nice rounded enclosure with some bolt holes, so I just clamped it down, stood it off with a couple of extra bolts there, and then that's all there is to this bit. Okay then, so the last bit is the bit or the stand that actually holds the rod and sets the angle that it's at. So I've got a block of wood here, and that again has just got one of those sort of hammer-in inserts that's threaded. I then use the pillar drill to drill a nice centered hole that stays straight all the way through, goes all the way down. I just use 2 nuts on the top with a washer just to spread the force, and that is just to try and hold it a bit more steady than if I clamped it just on a single bit of wood at the bottom. So nothing fancy going on here, just a bit of extra support. Then got a threaded rod all the way up. These two just undo, so if you want to change the angle, you just unspin this, that drops down, and then you can do this one up to tighten it afterwards. Now I would like to speed this process up, so on the inside I've just got a little a ring with a little lock sort of grub screw inside, so that at some later point I'll make a little insert so I can just twist it and lock it. That will hold it tight enough so I can just undo it, slide it down and lock it back into place. And that's everything. Right, so guys, that is my very questionable knife sharpener. I hope you've enjoyed watching it, and hopefully you might have gained a little bit if you are looking to make your own knife sharpener. A couple of the things that I point out, this bit here that spins, on the redesign I'm planning to do, I'm going to have it lifted up and angled so that when you, so I don't know if you can see from here, but if I have it angled at that sort of an angle, as it spins, these are a lot less likely to hit the work surface. So I won't have to have it hanging over a bench, I could do it all on top of the bench. So I'll lift it up, tilt it back, and then I'll just have to adjust the angle that the bit at the back sits. One of the other things is I thought, oh, I want to have a really, really accurate angle. So if you've done any trigonometry recently, you'll know that the bigger the triangle is, the more movement you have to make at one end for it to have a bigger angle. So obviously knives are sharpened between potentially sort of 10 to 30 degrees. I can't remember. Depends if you're looking at the included or half of the angle. Anyway, I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments if they know. But the whole idea is that if I pin it at one end, if I move it by, say, a centimetre this end, it will change by a few degrees. But if I have it here and move it by a centimetre, it's going to change a lot more of the angle. So I decided to have it really long, totally unnecessary. My recommendation is to have it, if you measure from wherever your knife edge is here on the front, the very tip of the file needs to be, or the longest instrument you're going to use to be sharpening, that doesn't hit the back here, included with any nuts and bolts you might have here to secure it. So really, I could have had it more like this, a lot shorter. The springs that I've used, obviously that's just something that, like, if I had spent more time looking into it, I might have been able to find some springs that would fit. If you can find some, great. Use a smaller rod, equally just as good. Otherwise, it all works pretty well. Obviously on the redesign now, I've got the milling machine. I'm going to be able to do everything a lot more accurately. I'm going to cut a 45 degree into some metal for the clamp to go on the stones. I'm still not sure how I'm going to secure the file, but I'm going to do it somewhat better than what it currently is. And that's pretty much it. Well, thank you very much for watching my DIY knife. Okay guys, Okay guys, thank you very much for sticking around and watching my DIY knife sharpener video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, hopefully you've got something from it if you're trying to make your own. Got any suggestions, please do leave them down in the comments. I could do with all the help I can get. Of course, if you've enjoyed the video, please do hit the like button. And I just wanted to say a big thanks to all of my recent subscribers and all of the ones that have stuck with me from the beginning. I'm very grateful to everybody, so please do, if you've enjoyed the video, any new people, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!